Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, in the room and online. Welcome to today's session entitled Skills for a Green Future, the Way Forward Towards a Just Transition. My name is Adjoa Atakra. I am the Director of Engagement and Delivery at NDC, a large international NGO focusing on education, youth development, and health projects in about 80 countries. Today we have a very interesting and important topic. We are here to discuss the importance of skills as we move towards a green and just transition. COP28 has certainly started on a good note. The narrative here has been very uplifting. In just 1 week, key stakeholders had pledged over $83 billion US, which really is impressive and notable. We have heard about the importance of there being more money, more investment, more infrastructure, right? All of which is critical and is true. What we haven't heard so much about, however, is the need for more investment in human capital. That is more investment in skilling in order to ensure that tomorrow's youth in particular and people in general have the necessary skills they need in order to drive the economy. So for that reason, we're here today to shed some light on this critical topic, and I will be joined shortly by my esteemed guests who will be sharing their perspectives and experiences from 2 countries, and then also a couple organizations. So in order for us to achieve a green and just economy, we will all need to learn how to do things differently. Business as usual will not work. Companies, philanthropies, institutions, etc., will all need to learn how to work differently, how to organize differently, how to partner differently in order for us to achieve our objectives. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker today, Ms. Ingrid Gabriela Hoven, who is the Managing Director of GIZ, a leading German development agency. She is a development economist with more than 30 years of international experience and is focused on sustainability and climate issues over her long career. Prior to this, Ms. Hoven served as the World Bank Group Executive Director representing Germany. Ms. Ingrid, please join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adjoa, for this very kind introduction, and also from my side, a warm welcome. These are very busy times. I know that some of you are working in parallel on text and good decision making on the last mile of this very important COP, which can become a very historic COP with groundbreaking decisions if we take the right decisions now on the last mile. As Adjoa said, it had an incredibly good start with the inauguration of the Loss and Damage Fund and pledges that are new pledges for up to almost $700 million US. This is amazing, and I think when I look back, for instance, COP in Madrid, this was still considered unfeasible, and now we are there. But still, some way to go. And especially also, as we just heard from Mustafa, also when it comes to education and skills, it's recognition as a very important investment into the transformation that is needed and to create a double dividend, because this is what the thing is about, a double dividend by actually protecting our climate and at the same time creating big new opportunities for people and for the next generation. Just 2 days ago, GIZ, EDC, and the NDC, yeah, I was just thinking this was missing my text, nevertheless. The NDC partnership, which is a long-standing partner of the NDC and GIZ, of course, we invited representatives from countries, institutions, and philanthropic organizations to coalesce like-minded stakeholders around a rational and need for an action agenda to accelerate skills development for green and climate-adapted economy. Today, actually, I'm at this already. Thus, we discussed concrete action plans, including developing a clear narrative, assessing the scalability of solutions, establishing co-design teams, creating a much stronger nexus between the skills development and the climate agenda, which is clearly relevant. And on our part, GIZ, we are very much committed in turning this a reality. Today, we want to continue this exchange with a little bit more in depth, with experts that have actually knowledge how this already is being done on the ground or what they observe as needs. And I think this is good that we have this time to come together. As ILO and others have pointed out, after deducting the job that will be lost, or of course, transition means that the economy will change. The economy will be transformed, which means that in some sectors there will be less jobs, but there may be more jobs in other sectors. And in total, when you take it much more from the positive side, the estimates of ILO, and Mustafa, you're going to allude to it or correct it, please do so. But I mean, when you look into the bigger opportunity, ILO numbers tell us that there are 100 million jobs that can be created. But, I mean, these are aggregate numbers. For these jobs to be filled, young people and the existing workforce need to receive the timely technical and vocational education and training, reskilling, upskilling. Otherwise, the green transformation will be significantly delayed. Even the 1.5 target can be jeopardized. According to a recent study from the Boston Consulting Group, expected delays in the implementation of climate and energy projects could result in a temperature rise of 0.1 degrees Celsius. This might not seem to be a high number at first glance. However, we know, for instance, from the Global Methane Pledge that the reduction of methane emissions of 1.2 degree by 2050 is highly significant. So even the skilling issue, I mean, whether we delay projects that would actually drive the transformation and what this could cause in global warming is quite significant. Every reduction counts. This is our philosophy. And this is a field where we, as I've said at the beginning, and this is a field with a very high double dividend. COP24 of 2018 was the first COP to declare the green transformation and the just transition as crucial for an effective, inclusive, and climate-resilient development, at least in theory. Since then, the topic of skills development has been more present in the international discourse. A range of actors have been working on the promotion of skills development for the green transformation. ILO has been at the forefront, but also UNESCO, UNICEF, UNDP, or UNESCO UNIVOC have developed narratives and initiatives, to name but a few. The European Green Deal also focuses on a just and green transition, of course. Germany has also been strongly engaged in this area. As you will know, in 2022, under German presidency, the G7 announced their commitment to increase the share of official development assistance programs aimed at skills and employment promotion, which are directed specifically towards green sectors or greening of traditional sectors by 2025. Germany attempts to double its ODA share in this regard. At a side event organized by the ILO and the G7 on December 6, BMZ confirmed this commitment and called for stronger partnerships and financing, as well as the integration of skills and jobs creation measures into the NDCs. And this is precisely what we are striving for as well, and therefore are sitting today in this NDCP pavilion. And Mr. Kamage, who was also a panelist at this event, you might also perhaps tell us more about this. In addition, last week, the German Ministry for Economy and Climate Action, together with BMZ, presented Germany's contribution to accelerating the energy transition. And more vocational training, skills development is at the core of this commitment. But let's be frank also about the gap that we are seeing right now. The action so far has not been sufficient. Of the 183 NDCs, 2/3 recognize the relevance of skills development, but less than 40% have implementation plans for such capacity development. LTLEDs, the long-term emission development strategies, underline the country's commitment to a just transition in almost 60% of the cases. But only a third actually elaborate on a dedicated mission or a vision for skills development. This clearly shows room for improvement and the necessity to improve strongly aligned LTLEDs and NDCs. Considering the upcoming NDC updating cycle and the efforts many countries are making to develop their long-term strategies, now is a very good moment to create a stronger climate and skills nexus. In September of this year, at the African Climate Summit, a panel of African First Ladies, GIZ and EDC, pointed out the main exciting gaps. An information gap, which I've just alluded to, the skills training and education gap, that is what we observe on the ground in our partner countries, the coordination gap. I've alluded to a couple of initiatives, and I haven't named all of them, but are they really working together towards a country-led joint goal? I would put a question mark behind that. The financing gap, absolutely. Does actually skills development for the transformation get access to the increasing finance for climate? Question mark. I think there's still a long way to go to really factor it in and make it happen. And finally, the inclusion gap. Let's be frank, it's not only about the numbers. When we really embark on an education and skill agenda, it's really to bring everybody on board. The young people, women, those that are perhaps nowadays left behind in our societies, because they don't feel empowered really to be part of this transformation. And there is a huge risk embedded in such a situation, because those people may actually fear that the transformation doesn't bring the big opportunity, but really changes life for the worst. So the inclusion gap is also a very important one. At that panel in Nairobi, at a wonderful location, we came out of the meeting by saying we need a more pronounced global action plan to address these gaps. We need a more coherent approach by many, many stakeholders. And we are now working together, and this is another part of this momentum, to mobilize support from the different sectors, public sector, private sector, the philanthropic sector, to really scale up activities on the ground for this new mission. Today, we are here very much looking forward to hearing from you, from our experts, much more about the perspectives of countries that already work strongly on the promotion of education and skills for the energy transition. And you can showcase actually that this is feasible and that it is doable. And I'm excited to hear about Brazil's and Jordan's national initiatives and concrete activities in this regards. I think you are like front runners. You can set new models, role models in this regard. And we are also so privileged that we are partnering with both countries in this respect. So thank you very much. I wish you a very exciting morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hoven, for that very detailed and thorough overview of the situation and that we'll be discussing now. Indeed, there are opportunities. There are also gaps, that we will need to address. Our experts in the room will be speaking to all of the above, and I have the pleasure of introducing our experts to you now. So please come and join us here on the stage. To start with, Mr. Hamze Bukai, Director of the German Energy Academy in Jordan at the Al Hussein Technical University. Welcome. He leads a consortium of Jordanian and German institutes in establishing high-quality capacity-building training programs in the energy sector in Jordan and the region. I understand that under his leadership, the GEA has expanded trainings from solar, PV, and energy efficiency to include more updated fields in order to cover the new skills that youth will need to drive the just transition. Can we please welcome Mr. Andre Andrade to the stage? Welcome. Ms. Andrade is the Director of the Climate Governance Department of the Ministry of Environment in Brazil. He oversees the Interministerial Committee on Climate Change. He's an economist and a political scientist who has served in different capacities, providing technical and advisory services to the Ministry of Finance and the Executive Office of the Brazilian Presidency. Can we please welcome Dr. Mustafa Kamal Gay as well? Please. Dr. Gay is the coordinator of the Green Jobs Program at the ILO in Geneva. Prior to that, he worked at UNEP, where he served as the acting head for Green Economy Advisory Services. And before that, he worked with the International Center for Trade and Sustainable Development, also in Geneva. Last, but certainly not least, is Dr. Nada Barada. Dr. Barada is a youth scholar and international development practitioner who advances education, climate, and workforce solutions for young individuals, enhancing youth livelihoods, including advocacy roles such as being a youth delegate at ANGA, and also serving as an African Union champion. I have the pleasure of working with Nada at EDC, and at EDC she helps to manage our youth and workforce and climate initiatives. So in terms of the agenda today, we will be addressing a few questions to our esteemed panelists. And so we'll have a rich discussion, after which we will invite Ms. Amanda McKee to the stage to offer some closing remarks. I'm going to transition here. Okay. Welcome, everybody, once again. The first question is addressed to Dr. Kamal Gay from the ILO. ILO has been championing just transition for many years and has done excellent work in this field. Could you please speak to us about some of the lessons learned, some of the gaps and opportunities that you have identified, and specifically with regards to increasing skills development for a just transition?
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me in this very important discussion. One of our starting statements and key messages in engaging from the world of work is that we're all here to raise ambition, to tackle climate change. But we realize, and our member state parties also realize, that ambition is not just about numbers. It's not just 1.52 degrees. Ambition is ultimately about people. It's when we will have workers that have the right skills to change energy systems, our transport systems, agriculture and food systems, when we have enterprises that have the capabilities to innovate, invest, and transform their business models, and communities to diversify their economies. All of this comes to people who have to do that. And so this means that people are at the center of climate action. We see around the world engagement. All citizens, and this is coming from surveys of UNDP and everyone, are for climate action. But the missing gap is the ambition and the capacity to act and to act in the right way. And so this is where education and skills become central. So this is why in our work in the IO in the past several years, we've carried a global assessment of skills for a green economy, and another one, skills for future of work in the green economy. And we find this gap between the demands for labor markets now and into the future in the green economy and the supply. And this comes in various kinds of occupations where you look at high skilled occupation, medium skills to low skill occupations. And we also find this gap in terms of technical training, vocational education. And that's why last year with the Iowa Skills branch, we worked on a new guide of greening TVET, where we aim to engage with organizations that provide technical training to bring in those offering the occupations, the offers, the occupation that we see coming into the demand for labor, but where the offers of training are not yet there, where at least at the level where it needs to be. So we think this is being taken up very much more importantly by member states. But there is a gap also, as I was just bringing to the attention of Ingrid before we started. You know, in this COP, there is a discussion on a just transition work program. And as it stands, the draft, at least the last draft that I have seen, doesn't have any reference to education and skills. It was in the draft before, maybe Andre can correct me, 9 a.m. 2 days ago, yeah. But then the last one that went up dropped it. So I have been reaching out to Singapore, to the US delegation, to find out what's the issue with having education and skills in a just transition. I just myself ask, how will countries have a just transition without education and skills? So there is a realization, but sometimes we have this loophole. But of course, yeah, it's encouraging. We see important steps, and it's encouraging. But I think some important achievements have to be made at this COP.
Thank you very much for really highlighting that. I think you couldn't have said it better. There can be no just transition without an investment in education and skills. The fact that there is currently a gap, you know, between the demand and supply of the skills that will be needed to drive, you know, this transition is really an opportunity for us all, you know, and I think you spoke to the importance of, you know, labor market assessments, for example, you know, in order to identify what the actual needs, you know, are today, what the needs will be tomorrow, and then charting forward, you know, the path with regards to what investment and what capacity development needs to be invested in our youth and in our people of tomorrow. I think that we can speak a little bit now about some of our initiatives at the country level. We have our representatives from Jordan and Brazil here, and maybe we can start with Jordan. And if you wouldn't mind speaking to us a little bit about the Jordanian experience in Jordan with regards to skills development. What are some of the achievements? What are some of the initiatives that you are implementing? And what are some of the challenges that you would want to raise today?
Yeah, thank you, and it's really a pleasure to be here among you in COP28. Ironically, I was here actually in Dubai 2 years ago for the expo, but I was wearing a different hat. I was actually still working in the industry, in the solar industry, just 1 month before being recruited to lead the German Energy Academy in Jordan. And the fact that I came from the industry was no surprise for the vision of this establishing of this academy, because the whole idea was to bring partnership, to bring experts, to bring academia together and develop something that represent the need for the skill market in Jordan. It was the academy itself, it was under the Energy Partnership Program, that is a GIZ program related to the Ministry of Energy in Jordan and the Ministry of Economics and Climate Action in Germany. The idea behind it is to build the bridges between both countries, between the public and private sector, between academia and industry. And this is actually what we managed to do, because when compared to previous programs, and not only in Jordan, but actually even in the region or maybe globally, most programs are focusing on what academia needs or what, or just centralized on the industry. There was always a gap between the two parties to bring together and customize training. And this is what we worked from day one in the academy, and now also, as mentioned in your introduction, we managed to expand it into the new skills. So at the beginning, we took a benchmark in PV installation, which is a topic that has been in Jordan for 10 years. And I myself, I came actually from a computer background, but also had this undergoing skills development, so I could enter to the solar industry when it was booming first in Jordan. The idea at that point, it was mainly theoretical, mainly academic based. There was still a gap of understanding what is needed in the workplace. Today, we see many similar initiatives, not only in the energy sector, but also in ICT and agri-tech, where we're looking into what the companies are needing and what we can bring from academia to fill these gaps. And I think this is mainly what skills development, especially towards green future, need to tackle, to bring together the private sector, to bring together the experts, and to customize the skills needed so that the youth would have better employability potential in the green jobs that's coming in the future.
Thank you very much for highlighting the importance of bridging the gap between, what is in academia or what is theoretical, and then the practical needs on the ground, in the communities at the ground level. And certainly we all need to come together. As you said, it's not just the companies, but it's also donors and philanthropists and everybody as well. I'd like to ask the same question for Brazil. If you could please speak to us about some of the initiatives taking place in Brazil. What are some of the lessons learned? What are some of the gaps and some of the opportunities?
Okay, good afternoon. Yes, it's after midday. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us here from the Ministry of Environment. Well, we are, I would say that we are trying to recover our climate policy in Brazil right now and trying to address 4 main gaps. The first one is the political gap. So we need to ensure that we're gonna have political willingness, political will during the whole cycle of the policy, of the climate policy, of NDC implementation. This is the first one. The second one is about rebuilding institutions and policy process. So we are also launching some initiatives related to rebuild trust, rebuild connection, coordination among stakeholders within the government and between the government and the private sector and civil society. The third one is about the development and production of information and data for decision making, which is also critical when we talk about adaptation finance, which is very key in this COP. What we are talking about when we talk about this matter, about phasing out, phasing down, what we are talking about that. So we need to have the right information to take decision. And finally, which is I think on the top of that and has many interactions with the other 3 gaps, with these resources. So not only resources about financial resources, but also human and technical resources. And then I go to what we are trying to do. And I will provide a brief overview about our view in the public sector. So the first aspect that I have to highlight, if we are planning policies and plans to implement mitigation and adaptation actions, we need to enhance, we need to build capabilities within the public sector. So, and this is very critical in Brazil. If you look at the map of Brazil in terms of inequalities and capabilities, Brazil is very diverse in terms of in economic and ecological and social terms. So we have capabilities in some ministries, but we don't have in the other ministries that are very important to climate policy when I speak in the federal government level, but also when we go to the subnational governments. This became more complicated because we have, I would say, quite good capabilities in the south and the southeast of Brazil, But in the north and northeast of Brazil, we don't have capability to make policy, to make climate policy. So how I will come up with these guys while I trying to build a national policy on climate change if they don't have the same level of knowledge, the same level of understanding that we have. So in January, when we started the administration, this was very clear for us, and then we started to plan capacity actions, the development of capabilities, not only in the Ministry of Environment, but also in the other 35 ministries that we have in the federal administration, but also and especially at the subnational levels of government, municipalities and state level. And the first measure that we adopt was to add in our new 4-year plan, which is the main piece of governmental plan in Brazil, we call PPA, Pluriannual Plan, a specific, within our program of climate emergency, and specific activities about capacity building for public servants. And then with that, we aim to train until 2027, 3,000 civil servants from the federal government, state, and municipal government. So that's the first one. But yes, it's only a pledge. We need to take it from the paper. So we established a technical cooperation agreement with our national public administration school, ENAP, in Brasilia, between the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Innovation, which is where the school is placed, to develop different skills, different courses related to climate science, climate mitigation, climate finance, climate adaptation, whatever. It's more or less 15, 20 short and long-term courses to train these guys from the Ministry of, from the federal government, but also in the subnational. And to give scale to that goal, we are planning to use virtual schools. So that's because then we could spread the word and spread this course all over the Brazil, not only in Brasilia or in the capitals. And to be very honest, if you manage to do so, 3,000 is nothing comparing with these two. I think that we could go further ahead and training much more than this target if you manage to find this this virtual place to train these guys. And also, we are looking for support, and we have a very nice cooperation, a very important cooperation with GIZ in Brazil. We have the POMUC, the program on climate change, and now last week in the bilateral consultations between Germany and Brazil, we just confirmed the new phase of this POMUC. I don't know if Ingrid is aware about that, Ingrid. But we have 10 million euros to implement this new phase of the climate change program in Brazil with GIZ. And one of the components is exactly capacity building for civil servants and for the private sector. So part of that money will go to help us in building these targets and these actions that we are planning within the PPA and within the technical cooperation agreement. And about the private sector, it's very important. We, as government, we can't train private sector employees, but we can enable the trainer of these guys. So we are trying to also form multipliers from the private sector to train the insurance sector, the financial sector, the energy sector. So we are trying to also be very smart, trying to get our contacts in the private sector to help them while they are addressing their gaps in terms of climate skills and green skills on their respective sectors. And finally, we are also speaking with Apolitical, which is a very knowledgeable and sound think tank in this matter of skill building resources. And we are also trying to see with them if it's possible, and we're gonna imagine it, to translate many of the courses in climate change and green policies and environmental policies that they already have on their platform, translate from English to Portuguese, because this is an issue for Brazil and probably for some countries. We need lots of knowledge. We need good knowledge in English, in French, and in Spanish sometimes, but we don't have in Portuguese. And Brazil is very different. We can't speak at the same level as we are here with my colleagues from other regions in Brazil. So we are trying to make it, to try to reduce the elitist way as we treat climate policy in Brazil. And I think that this is maybe could be a way to think in other countries, because not only in English the knowledge should be available, but also in other language, to make the contact with the subnational and the local governments available. Remember, this is the COP where the local governments are being empowered, so it's very important to remember while we are planning capabilities and these kind of programs, to include them. And language is very important to that. I stop here, and thank you.
We'll just pause, but we'll continue the conversation. Thank you very much. That was very very important. You highlighted several points. One, the importance of access to information. You know, we talk about decision making. One cannot make sound decisions without access to accurate and timely information. And so that's something that I think we all need to keep in mind as we think about, you know, scaling some of these initiatives and working on the various policies, including climate policies, in our respective countries and institutions. A second point that I'd like to highlight is, you know, in terms of capacity development, you mentioned moving away from the quote-unquote elitist way of doing things, focusing on one subgroup of the population. I think that's very key as well. You very effectively, you know, raise the issue of inclusion, you know, whether it is bridging the gap between the private sector and the public sector, or even within populations, making sure that with regards to language, that the resources that are available benefit everybody. So it's not just English, it's not just Portuguese, but we have to take into account different dialects and different languages so that everybody, you know, everywhere can have access to this information. So thank you so much for those important reminders. As you touched on inclusion, I think that was a perfect segue to our next question. Dr. Barada, how can we ensure the inclusion of vulnerable and marginalized groups, particularly youth, in shaping the green transition? What, according to you, would this green transition look like?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I think by now we know that if we're envisioning this green future together, we're going to need more than sustainability managers. We're going to need all of us to relearn what we do as consumers, as citizens, and as workers from all across. And as I think about inclusion, I want to spend some time thinking about what are some of the barriers that I've come across in my research, in different conversations that I've been very privileged to have with different young people in the different networks that I belong to. I think one of the first one is the awareness of green jobs. When we look at the data, there's still very little percentage of young people that graduate in green job sectors. So how can we actually inform them about what are the green jobs prospect look like for them? How do we bring this information closer to them about what careers look like where they live? The other one is the educational requirements as well. Many of the jobs in the green sectors require a higher level of education. The majority of young people don't have access to a university degree. In the US, for example, 62% of young people aged between 18 and 24 were not in college. Another barrier as well is how do we compensate for the loss of income in pursuing training to reskill or upskill, for instance? When we look at the green jobs and green sectors, STEM fields are very much in demand. STEM fields are where many of the green jobs are. And we know also that women and girls are underrepresented in these sectors. Globally, on average, women represent only 28% of the workforce in science-related fields. And we also know as we think about leveraging different ways of learning through online or technology or AI, we have to also acknowledge that there is a digital divide in many of the countries that we encounter. Access to technology, high connectivity costs, etc., and the like. So how do we take that into account? So thinking about some of these barriers, what are some of the strategies of improvements or things that we need to keep in mind as we design different programs and ways that we look at this? Well, one that I want to highlight is one about the job creation and the quality of jobs. Now, we can prepare young people and individuals for green jobs, but equally important, we need to ensure that these jobs exist and exist where they live. And we need to be able to continue to work together across multiple partners to bring this knowledge to them, as well as also in not just training them for jobs that don't exist or don't have an earning power, which I think is also equally important. The other one, and I think we've touched on this, is to broaden the definition of green jobs to include both jobs in green sectors, like in renewable energy, green construction, waste management, but also the greening of professions, like a hairdresser or a restaurant owner, etc. And then as we think about skill enhancement, we need to advocate for non-informal training methods, partnerships with vocational institutions. GIZ has done some very good research and work on that. Upskilling, reskilling, providing apprenticeship experiences. We've been talking in Jordan, and that's very much what you try to provide. Working with public servants is another wonderful way. We have a project at EDC where across 11 countries in South Asia, Waisili, we have one of the COI leaders here with us and also works on that project that tries to include leadership as well as environment courses and provide actually on work-based experience for young people through that program in nonprofits, in the research sector, in the public sector, in the private sector, because all work areas are concerned. Another point of inclusion that I really want to mention is a lot of the conversation that we're having is around the formal economy. But the informal economy actually is where the majority of poor people work, trade, produce, and live. In sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, the informal sector contributes about 55% of the GDP, 80% of the labor workforce. Informal economies are a response to poverty, to inflation, to the fluctuation in the formal economy. We have great examples all around the world. India, for example, where we have waste management, waste pickers who are doing some really great and efficient work. We need to know how we can leverage those workers, how we can work with them. And that's where the entrepreneurship training comes into place. How do we work with communities in their formal economy through different entrepreneurship programs, training, work-based learning programs to integrate some of the youth that are working in these sectors that represent the majority in some context. And then how do we do this collectively? We really need everybody from all sectors. I think you all are great representations of that work, but continuing also to address problems that we still face. All of the SDGs, advancing on achieving some of those targets are key to the climate action. We're talking about poverty, inequality, digital disparities. We cannot help solve the climate crisis without continuing to address those very, very key and important causes. And then intergenerational collaboration. We need to work with youth as expert and as equal, and to be basically developing these different roadmaps intergenerationally, not one for the other, but really together. And then also thinking through, different knowledges that has preceded us, indigenous knowledge that have been existing for thousands of years, indigenous communities that are doing this. How can we really make sure that they are also, we're learning from each other in that regard? And lastly, what I want to say is that young people are already doing this work. People have to find ways to make a living. They're already on the ground. What I found in a lot of my conversation is that we cannot just rely on individuals to actually get by. They need actually supportive systems to be able to do that. And this is where, again, we really need everyone to support in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Nada. That was a very thorough response. Thank you for bringing our attention to so many of these critical issues. When we speak about inclusion, we need to make sure that youth are represented at the table, but not just that they're treated as equal and given the opportunity to lead the way, as you're doing. So thank you so much. We have a few minutes left. Before I invite Ms. McKee here, I thought that I would ask one question and ask the panelists to quickly share their perspectives. So, what single change, if implemented immediately, could most effectively boost opportunities for green job growth? If there was one thing that you could say, what would that be?
Well, if I would start, I would say the mindset in the youth. Mindset in the youth, and also job seekers, even professionals who are working now in conventional sector or non-green, let's say. unfortunately, we have maybe more than 5,000 applicants who applied for the trainings that we offered in the last 2 years. Maybe less than 1% indicate as a reason for participating is interest in climate actions, green opportunities. Most people are searching for job opportunity, increase their chances. In a country where we have 20% of unemployability rate, people have high competition to find jobs, whether green or not. That's for them is not the most relevant. So I think if we start working on this mindset, to have people appreciate what they're doing, to have this hero vision, every one of us want to be a superhero, to have this hero vision that I'm saving the climate, I'm doing a job, or I'm upskilling myself into new skills that will save the planet in the future, that will reduce the carbon footprint, then we will have more appreciation of what they're doing before just seeking the next step, a job. Or even like one thing that we also were discussing with the companies in their job advertising, if they emphasize on the green opportunity, emphasize on the added value of this job, or even like in the skills to request people to have some basics knowledge on climate issue, carbon services and so on, then this will also make youth running towards having those upskilling or those skills that are related to the green jobs. So I think this is one thing that we need to work on. And I also just thought of what was mentioned 2 days ago in the session about the janitor who was working in NASA, and just quoting the US president, when he was asked what you're doing here, he said, I'm sending a man to the moon. And I think this is what we need to build in our youth, that they are saving the planet. That's why they need to upskill themselves with the green skills.
Thank you so much. Please, so we're running out of time, so quick minutes for everybody, please.
I would be very briefly and focus on the public sector. I would say that one effective way to enhance capabilities within the public sector related to climate and environment and all other green skills is make, for example, when we have an income civil servant, we provide a training to them. So we need to make it mandatory in this training, some subjects related to climate emergency and environmental issues. I think that this would be interesting, a way to rapidly change the figure. I don't know if you have this number, but about 65% of the whole civil servants don't have any kind of training climate policy. So we are in a ship or in a flight that where the pilots don't have enough knowledge about the instruments that are in their pilot. So it's more or less the way as I feel. So we need to try to rapidly change this situation. So make it mandatory for public servants to have at least 1 or 2 days of climate policy.
We definitely have to find a way to turn things around, that's for sure. Mr. Gay, Dr. Gay.
Well, my one point would be to bridge the gender disparities in the green economy. When we started our work, we assumed that there are gender disparities in labor markets now, but when you enter a green economy, new economy, women and men will have same opportunities, but it's not the case. In our assessment of jobs in the energy sector, we find 24 million jobs possible by 2030. Of that, only 6 million go to female workers. So this is why we're bringing to attention to members that there must be dedicated policy interventions to empower girls and women participation. Of course, there's better than fossil fuel. With Irina, we looked at jobs. You know, in the fossil fuel, it's 22% estimates, but 32% in renewables, it's good. But this is also why we started the COP with this event where we partnered with GIZ on gender responsive just transitions. And this is also why with the German government and GIZ, we're now running a specific project on green jobs for women in Senegal, in Western Africa. So this is some of the intervention models where all the KPIs are about girls and women getting green jobs, having the right skills to be in entrepreneurship, etc. But just to make that point, bridging the gender gaps in the green economy will be a critical element.
Definitely, I totally agree. Dr. Barada.
I think, well, you mentioned, I think the work with the workers and employers, public servants, work on women. I have to mention the private sector. I think there is no way we're going to address this crisis without involving big and small, different companies. So I think what would boost skills development for me is to really provide incentives to private sector entities, big or small, to shift their practices better for the planet, for humans, and therefore then that would actually trigger to creating job opportunities for which we can continue to skill and prepare the workforce for. But that is really, really key, providing the incentives to reduce some of the carbon emissions of private sectors.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank all of you for sharing your expertise with us today. It was an excellent conversation. Thank you so much. Now, just to close, I know that we're almost at time. I'd like to welcome Ms. Amanda McKee, who is the Director for Knowledge and Learning with the NDCP Support Unit. She oversees the development of knowledge products and learning activities to support NDC implementation and ambition-raising efforts across the partnership members and beyond. Ms. McKee, please join us.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to congratulate GIZ and EDC for organizing this session and for bringing together such a really interesting and compelling panel. I think you made my job easy in terms of summarizing, because the summary is that it's complex. We often talk about skills, we often talk about training as an activity, and the biggest thing that I took from this panel is that, first of all, the opportunities are immense, but tapping into them is going to require us being a lot more creative and a lot more deliberate in how we're approaching this, whether it's with the private sector, whether it's with the public sector, whether it's looking at the just transition element, whether it's looking at formal education versus the definition of what skills are, versus informal economy versus soft skills. So really, there's so much work to do. And I wanted to actually take a step back and look at this more broadly within the context of the NDCs, because this is where I'm coming from with the NDC partnership. We're supporting countries to drive NDC implementation. Currently, we're supporting approximately 90 countries in this effort. And a majority of those countries, 90% of those countries, have shared requests for support for us based on capacity building. And so when I think about that, I think about it from these different angles that were discussed today. Again, it's not just an activity that we match with a partner, but this really cuts across the entire aspect of the NDC cycle. So whether that's the actual development of the NDC and engaging the right people and ensuring they have the skills to do so, whether that's the implementation of it, but also the financing of it is a whole other skill set, both for the private sector, the public sector, individuals that we need to be thinking about. Less than, I said 90% of countries, right? So less than a third of our members, though, are requesting support around jobs and employment opportunities. So capacity building is massive, but jobs, employment opportunities, less so in terms of the priority there. And even fewer, so 10% of the partnership's developing country members are requesting support specifically related to green skills development amongst the workforce for a just transition. So I think you can think about this from multiple angles. The interest is there, the goodwill is there, but our job is actually to bring it down to the levels that we need to bring it in order to ensure that these capacity building efforts actually have the intended outcome that we want. One additional thing I wanted to share is that looking at the partner response to that. So our job through the NDC partnership is helping to coordinate support around these requests. And significant support is still needed. So of the green skills development requests that have come through, only about 50% of them are attracting support. So this is a big gap. But there's also a significant scope for partners to scale up their technical, their financial resources. Countries should and can do more to prioritize green skills developments amongst their workforce. So really we saw bringing together a whole of society approach, working towards a truly long-term planning for a sustainable future. One of the things that I wanted to note is that the NDC partnership is supporting countries in the next round of NDCs, and we've taken a really deliberate approach to not look at this in isolation around the NDC, but actually to combine it with the long-term strategies. And this is really where the skills development comes in, because what is our vision? How do we plan to get there? And how are we building up the skills to enable that? And so through our thematic call, this is an opportunity for countries to request support, linking and aligning the vision, the objectives, and what they're actually hoping to achieve, and what they need, the support that they need to achieve both their NDC and their long-term strategy. So I just want to conclude by saying I'm really pleased, again, to see this high-level engagement on such a critical topic. Some sort of coalition, some sort of group to bring this together is absolutely necessary. And so I'm really delighted to see that EDC and GIZ are working on this, and want to stress that the partnership is a willing partner. As I mentioned, there's a lot of requests coming through. There's a lot of opportunities for us to help put this in front of countries and help encourage them to tap into these opportunities. NDC partnership welcomes all countries and partners, really committed to scaling up and streamlining this collaboration, because by acting together, we can achieve more. We've said this countless times this week, but it's our mantra for a reason. And I just want to conclude again by saying thank you so much to GIZ, to EDC for co-organizing this discussion, and all of the panelists and our participants today for your really invaluable contributions.